Our lectionary readings this morning include that reading from the book of Revelation. We don't very often have lectionary readings from Revelation, especially from the apocalyptical parts. Yes, we have sometimes the first part of Revelation where it talks about the church being maybe hot and cold, and where it's Jesus says, "I stand in the door and knock." But these very strange visions that St. John had, not often occurring in our lectionary readings. What do we have? A great portent appearing in heaven. A woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. What does this mean? What is it trying to say to us? And then it says there's another portent appeared in heaven. A great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 diadems on his heads. His tail swept down a third of the stars of heaven and threw them to earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so he might devour the child as soon as it was born. What is this meaning? What is it trying to say to us, and why is it in the scripture? Well, I think when those people who say you have to take the Bible literally, even they will begin to struggle somewhat with this sort of passage. I think even the most fundamentalists people would say, well, this is perhaps a little bit allegorical. It's not exactly a red dragon. It has another meaning beneath it. An allegory is something which is like a story or a poem or a picture which has a hidden meaning. And I think it's quite clear from this reading that the meaning is something that's hidden within it. Few people would say it's an actual dragon, but maybe it's a symbol of good versus evil, and the battle that is, in truth, raging in our world. So who is the woman meant to be? Well, traditionally she's been seen as Mary giving birth to Jesus, and that's certainly the Catholic view when you read about it. But also some others maybe have seen the woman as just symbolizing the church, giving birth to the truth, giving birth to Christ, or the Jewish history giving birth to Christ. And then who is the dragon? Well, that's perhaps more clear that the dragon is symbolic of the devil or Satan, or maybe just symbolic of evil itself. And if we were to read on in the passage from Revelation, it actually says that the dragon is Satan and describes him as being the one who was in the Garden of Eden, tempting in the form of the serpent. So if we can accept that this is an allegorical passage, where do we draw the line about what is and what is not allegorical? The book of Daniel, that has many strange parts in it too, and I think most people would agree that all the things of visions he had were often allegorical. And of course Jesus' parables, while not exactly being allegories, were not literal stories of something that had happened. When Jesus said a man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho in the parable of the Good Samaritan, he wasn't lying, but at the same time it's quite probable that a man never did actually go down from Jerusalem and Jericho, and that story is a story. It's not meant to be a literal historical account. And what about the book of Job? Is that an actual account of Job's life, or is it an allegory explaining much about suffering in the world? When I was at the seminary, there was some disagreement. The professor was saying, no, it's an actual account, and I think all the students said, no, it's an allegory. So it's not always agreeable what is and what is not. And what about the book of Jonah? Is that a true story when he's swallowed by the whale or the fish, or is that an allegory? Or is parts of it based on what happened and parts of it allegorical? In reading a book I've just been reading by John Shelby Spong, he said that many people believe the book of Ruth and the book of Esther to be allegorical. And that seemed very strange to me, because there's nothing to me in the book of Ruth that couldn't be a straightforward account of what happened. Nothing happens that's strange in that book. The person makes a choice to come and to go and live in a foreign land and shows the love they had for a friend. But there's nothing strange or mystical in what happens, so why would it have to be described as an allegory? Of course, many people who would accept that Revelation is an allegory would still try to hold to a literal interpretation of Adam and Eve. Yet both of them have a talking serpent or a dragon in there, and so why is one considered allegorical and the other not? I think it's because those who look at Adam and Eve as being a literal story want to hold on to it, maybe firstly because it's easy to understand. It's not a complicated story. Like the thing in Revelation, we just can't understand it. But also because it gives the key theological teaching they think is very important about the fall. And also because they're very much against evolution, and so this seems to be proof of must be what happened as an alternative. So people pick and choose what they see as allegorical and what they see as literal, very often based on their theology or based on their understanding of whether something's possible or not, or how important they think it is. I think the Bible is very important. I think the scriptures are, well, they are the source of all we know about Jesus. They're the source of very much of what we know about God. But we have to be very careful how we interpret the scriptures, and even more careful how we apply what we've interpreted. The ancient people were not more gullible than we are. They weren't stupid in that they just believed anything anyone told them. In fact, in many ways, they were more intelligent than often people are today. I don't believe Jesus took the whole of the Old Testament scriptures in that literal way that some people try and do that now. Because ancient people understood what myths and sagas were meant to be. When someone told them a story of how things came to be into being, or why things are like what they are, they wouldn't expect it to be a literal story. They would understand that it's like a parable, that it's like a hidden meaning beyond. Modern science has only really existed for about 300 years. And the modern historical approach to looking at history is similarly quite new. People before that period would not have interpreted the Bible as if it's a history book or a scientific textbook. No more, if I made a scientific thesis, would you ask me to please to sing the thesis, because we don't sing scientific theses. And the same thing if we had a hymn or a pop song, you wouldn't expect to test the hymn in a scientific laboratory. These things don't fit in that way together. For there are different ways of interpreting different things and different ways of working with different things. 2 Timothy 3:16 says, all scripture is God-breathed and is useful for teaching, equipping, and training in righteousness. But it doesn't say it's infallible, but it says it's very important and very useful. I don't mean to undermine the authority of the Bible. In fact, I think those who insist that everything in it is literally real are undermining the authority. For if you insist that people believe in a seven-headed dragon, talking snakes, or talking donkeys, then how can you get people to understand and to believe in all the rest? We have to be wise as we interpret and apply. But on the other hand, there is more to life than meets the eye. Madonna, in that famous song, not the mother of Jesus, but that other pop singer, said, we're living in a material world. Well, that's true, but the Christian faith tells us there is more than just the material. So although some parts of Scripture are allegorical, they are revealing a hidden truth which is much greater than just the physical world. There is such thing as good and evil. There is such thing as God. There is such thing as eternity put in the hearts of men and women. There is a spiritual realm. And this is something which our society and our world very largely has difficulty understanding or believing. Generally, if you watch a movie, if you watch a TV program, it's all about what's happening. The police are chasing the bad guys, whatever's happening. There's never anything other than the physical. The spiritual is sort of not there. But in real life it is there. There's more to life than meets the eye. There's more to prayer than just kind thoughts about each other, though that's important. But it does more. We can accept this without having to understand every part of it. Some parts of the Christian faith are simple. Love your neighbour as yourself. It's not easy, but it's a simple idea to understand. But some things are more beyond our understanding. How can we really explain the love of God? How can we really comprehend something as long as eternal life? How can we understand what spiritual warfare is, what this struggle between good and evil, which Scripture does reveal is happening? We generally live and move and work in a 3D universe. But there is that fourth dimension of the spiritual world which we struggle to reach out to. Our worship and our prayer attempts to do that. Often weekly, often, I don't mean weekly every week, I mean in a weak way. We struggle to reach out to God. But that's what we try to do, to reach towards the divine, to what is more than just the physical and the seen. We're surrounded by so much noise, by the TV, by radio, by Facebook and Twitter. But God is beyond and often waiting in the silence. We started turning the air conditioning off for the sermon, just so people can hear better. And you can hear the silence when I stop talking. And that's something we lose a bit when the air conditioner is running, but we can't sit in the heat all the time. But God is there in the silence. God is there when we give the time to listen to what God is saying to us. God is calling us to work with God's self, to change God's world and to bring divine knowledge into the world. To make justice, to make peace, to make a better world for all in His creation. And yet we have to take that time to have peace and to listen and to be in God's presence. And then we can begin with that changing of the world. The psalmist said, the knowledge of God is the beginning of wisdom. And that's where we need to start. Amen.